So it helps validate, it helps people be more of who they are and feel more of who they are. What are your strengths? What are the ways you do things? And that somebody else will do things perhaps a different way, and that's okay. And we're not meant to like be somebody else.
Practical mindfulness that meets you where you are. This is Mindfulness Unscripted. I'm Jon Orsini.
When you do readings with human design, how do you find that it helps people in unique ways, as opposed to like if astrology is part of it, but how is it more specific and how does it help people?
Well, I usually say first that if you're familiar with like personality assessments, like
Mhm.
Myers-Briggs, I used to facilitate DISC, a communication system, or if you know the Enneagram, all of those are personality assessments where you have to go in and answer a set of questions. With human design, you don't do that. You just need to know your birth information, including time, if you have that. And so it's
Mhm.
closer to astrology. And then the way I differentiate astrology and human design is that I find for myself that a lot of people will go, for example, to their horoscope for the day. And I think of
Mhm.
that as like the weather. Or you'll get an astrology reading from someone, and there's a lot to like, here's what your year ahead's going to look like. Or if you're at your Saturn return or Chiron return, there's going to be these things happening. So I think of it as sort of the journey that you're on. And I see human design as the vehicle or car that you're driving on that journey. It doesn't change. It gives you the kind of mechanics of your energy, of who you are. So it helps people understand themselves at a deeper level. It complements things probably like you find in a personality assessment and astrology, but it can seem like it's an even deeper view into who you are because it's looking at not just your energy blueprint, but a uniqueness because there's 3 billion combinations. So it's really a very unique blueprint that you were encoded with on your birth date.
Mm. All right, this is super interesting because for a lot of reasons. But one of the things I find really interesting is when it comes to the question of who am I, right? We're all always asking this question, who am I? Or at least whenever we sit down and get quiet and try to understand ourselves better, right? Who am I? Who am I? And the idea that there is a sort of a blueprint that can help us understand who we are, is really interesting. And also when we're trying to understand ourselves, I think it's interesting because I feel like understanding ourselves is contextual. Like in our conversation, that we bring out certain energies in each other versus other energies might get brought out in other conversations. So that's all interesting. But what I'm getting at is when we do have a deeper understanding of ourselves foundationally and fundamentally, I see it as, and I'm curious about your perspective on this. I see it as how we can take advantage of our strengths. Like we can identify where we're strong and really lean into that stuff, and we can identify aspects of ourselves that are like, oh, maybe that type of activity or that um, type of energy is not inherent to me. So maybe, like, say you're a business owner, maybe you're like, so I'll delegate that stuff to people who that's their specialty, and I'll lean into my strengths. And when we have a better understanding of who we are at that foundational level, we can support ourselves more in that way. Does that make sense or resonate?
Yeah, and that's a great point. And what I'll speak to a few things on that. First, that when you understand elements in your unique design, and you can find that online in a lot of places. You can Google it, you can go to my website for a free chart. But when you start to learn about some of the elements, you do recognize what are some strengths. A lot of people in my readings will say, "Oh, that validates, the way that I tend to do things." And I don't have to do it that way that somebody else is doing. I'm doing it the way that it's more natural for me. So it helps validate, it helps people be more of who they are and feel more of who they are. And so, yeah, it definitely helps you understand like what are your strengths? What are the ways you do things? And that somebody else will do things perhaps a different way. And that's okay. That we can honor sort of these different energies. And yes, when we're together, or whether it's a relationship or a business partnership or just working together, like there's different energies that show up, and we're not meant to like be somebody else. The other thing of human design that's really helpful, it also shows us where we're conditioned. And conditioning is what usually we've been taught I call it programming that either comes from your family, your ancestral lineage or culture, even from schooling, from marketing messages, media, what we're absorbing. And when we start to peel back that layer of that's conditioning that doesn't work for me, or really that goes against like helping my energy, then when we also use that as opportunities, and I'll bring in breath work, if we use healing modalities to help us with some of that releasing of conditioning or past traumas or experiences that no longer serve us. And then the final piece is that all of our human design aspects also have a shadow and a light, I would call it light, or healthy expression. So even when we're naturally who we can sometimes find ourselves like leaning a bit too much into the fear of judgment, for example. Yeah, that's conditioned, but it's also sort of innate. So then how do we lean into the other side of that um uh characteristic that we have, so to speak? So there's a lot of things in human design. We call it a rabbit hole because you can look at so many different things, and it's a really amazing exploration of the self.
Mm, beautiful. That's beautifully said, and it resonates really strongly. And um, we'll get into the specifics in just a moment here. I'm really looking forward to this. And I just want to say before we do, when you were talking about conditioning, I got chills because I mean every point you just made was it just not only beautifully articulated, just resonated very strongly. So much around conditioning. Like I said, it gives me chills because what I have realized just as a bullet point along my own journey is again with this bigger question, who am I? So much as I've gotten older, so much of who I thought I inherently was not me. It was cultural conditioning.
Hmm.
And regardless of gender or where you come from or how you grew up, there is just everybody's dealing with some degree of cultural conditioning. And if we really get quiet and we explore these different modalities, we can start to parse out who we truly are, as we're discussing here, and then what that cultural conditioning is, because sometimes it's really well disguised. We think we care about this or that, but we only care about it because we were raised in the culture and the time we're raised in or with the family we're raised with. And parsing that out has been one of the most liberating, like, how would I even say it? Because I don't want to use like platitudes or cliches, but it just yeah, I don't know how to not use a platitude or a cliche
Yeah.
because it just changed the earth I was walking on. Because once I realized, oh, that's just cultural conditioning, I was able to drop like weight, like heavy emotional baggage I was carrying because I thought I had to be this or I thought I had to do that. And I was like, that's not even me. And that's actually not even what I want, like what I truly want. And yeah, it's a life's work and it is so worth digging into. So I was just so happy to hear you say that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'll say one more thing about that, and then we can look at your human design a little closer. But um, right now, I mean, we're in some interesting times, some really unprecedented evolutionary times. And whether you're tuned into this or not, and especially your audience probably tuning into this is interested in, well, what is happening right now? There's a lot going on where the light is being shed on what do we really believe. Maybe there is no truth. Maybe it's just our different beliefs that are not all the same, that have differences. um and like you said, when you start to question, and I think that's really important, is to question, well, why do I do things a certain way? Does it serve me? Do I believe in this? Does that serve me? And to, like you said, I was envisioning like the weight coming off your shoulders. Um, and we carry a lot thinking we have to, for our families, maybe for even children, or um, just, the collective. And yet it doesn't really help when we're just not being who we authentically need to be. And that's a big word too coming up in these interesting times, is authenticity. They say that's even a higher vibration than love, like just you being you truly in the highest form of love and vibration and compassion and kindness. Like you being truly you is really important now more than ever.
Beautiful. I appreciate it. I've heard that recently too. Authenticity is even higher as a vibration, which is really interesting. And I think it's incredibly liberating too, because I find like in breath work sessions that I guide, where sometimes that breath really often gets into some really deeply emotional, expressive places that we can run into sort of roadblocks where we realize we've been limiting our expression of anger or limiting our expression of grief or sadness because we don't think we're supposed to feel quote unquote negative feelings or express certain feelings. But that if that's part of what's authentically flowing through us, it is in fact the highest vibration, not something to be stuffed down or pushed aside. And so I found it very liberating. So it's nice to hear you say that as well in this in the context of human design and everything that's going on. Um, so this is
Yeah.
fantastic. So I'm very excited to dive into this chart, obviously selfishly, because I'm so excited to learn more about human design in terms of my particular and specific roadmap, but also how it is an indicator how other people will experience and learn more about themselves through their own personal individualized roadmaps. Um, so yeah, let's go for it. Let's dive in. I would love to hear all the different aspects.
Great, great. And I did pull up your chart. And like I said, if your listeners want to, for example, go to my website to get their free chart, it's hdwithchristy.com. And you have to input your birth information. Make sure you input the right time. Sometimes it even asks for like military time instead of AM or PM. So I've had people say, "Oh, my design is different than before," and I'm like, "Look at the time." So I pulled yours up, and when you do get your design and look at it, it looks really complicated. There's like so much to it. I know I feel that way when I look at astrology charts. I'm like, there's so many symbols, and the easiest place to start with human design is first look at what is your energy type. And it's sort of a starting category. I call it the outside onion layer of who you are. And you and I share a similar type, yet there's so many other aspects again of our uniqueness. But there are 5 energy types. I'll go through them really briefly, but the majority of people are called generators or manifesting generators. I clump those together because they're similar. You and I are generator types, and these types make up 70% of the population. So many people are generator types, and what makes our energy tick or run, so to speak, is that we like being busy and productive. And that's just how we're built. Our energy is meant to be doing things. And when we wake up, if we're healthy and rested, we'll have a task list and we just kind of start doing our day, and we will go, go, go until usually evening. And then really important to just notice um, when you're when your energy is ready to sort of rest. But we often are called energizer bunnies. We can do a lot. We can say yes to a lot of things. We like taking on projects and tasks, and we're the builders of society. There are 3 other types that are somewhat different. They don't have that same sustainable workforce, life force energy. By the way, this comes from our sacral energy center, if you know the chakras. These other 3 types are called the projector, manifestor, and reflector, and they make up 30% of the population. The key thing for them is that they don't necessarily work hard, go, go, go through the day. They don't have that Energizer Bunny battery. They need more rest and downtime. But being surrounded by 70% generators, they'll pick up our energy, think that they can do things, and then burn out pretty quickly. These days, generators, I would say, also like us, who are busy, if we're over busy, if we're not doing the right kind of work, if we're feeling drained, we will also feel burnout if we say yes to too many things that really aren't serving us. So, I would guess, John, you're probably pretty busy, as we've talked right before we started recording, and I am too, usually. We also know when we need our downtime, but work is really important to us. And does that resonate for you?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I'll stay with absolutely. Yeah. Um yes, I never there's always this it's like a motor, you know what I mean?
That's
And
exactly how it is.
yeah, and especially like once I really get on a roll with things, even when it gets to the evening, I don't really know how to turn it off. And that's why I think I just as a bullet point here, I think that's why it's been so important to me in my life to choose things I'm passionate about because then even if I don't take a break, and I'm not advocating for that, I know it's important to rest and to take breaks, but then even if I don't feel burnout the way that I would if I was doing something just for the income or just for, for a specific singular reason. When it feels like an actual purpose, that's why I like that balance of feeling like I'm working on my purpose because then I don't feel like I have to stop. Granted, everybody needs to rest now and then. You know what I mean? But yes, so that definitely resonates. Um,
Yeah. Oh, I've got so much to say that I feel like human design finds us when we are on that path of self-discovery and personal growth. It finds us in the right timing. And I usually find with people that I do readings for or myself or like you that we've been doing some inner work. We've been doing the deeper self-care and that's perfect. How you said, you can really resonate with feeling like a motor and it's really important to be doing what lights up that motor so that it doesn't feel like burnout. Even work feels like it's not like hard work. And something else, like as we could go deep into the rabbit hole with your chart. We don't have time to go over all the elements, but just some quick nuances that are unique to you. You have an incarnation cross, which is like a life purpose called the cross of service. And so when you said something about choosing like what's really important for your work to serve others, probably to do like this work in with breath work and healing, it seems to really line up with your chart. It doesn't say the chart what you should be doing, but when I hear certain things that people say, you also mentioned like the motor, and that's our sacral center. And really important is another element in human design is how to make decisions using that gut motor feeling. And that's important for your design as well as mine. It's called sacral authority. It's another place you look in the chart to help you with deciding what to say yes to and what opportunities are not meant for you because they will burn you out if you take the wrong ones. So it all kind of starts, the picture starts to fall into place when, and I love this, like doing these readings on a podcast because you'll talk about things that resonate. And then I'll say, yep, that's what your chart sees or shows. And it's just very in line with things.
Beautiful. And real quick, I'm just curious, what is the difference? You said generators and manifesting generators are pretty similar.
Yes.
What is like the difference? Even if subtle.
Yeah, it's their how their energy operates. One usually is much quicker than the other. The manifesting generators tend to be faster. They like to find shortcuts. They're juggling multiple projects. So they like to be busy, but they like to be sometimes super busy. They have a lot of things going on at once. Um, I know I feel that sometimes. You might feel that sometimes. Sometimes we're picking that up from others, but generator types also like want to make sure okay, let me make sure I'm um checking off all the boxes and going A, B, C, D in sequence, whereas a manifesting generator sort of takes the short route and then it may have to go back and cover some steps. But we're both builders. We're both
Hmm.
really built with that generator sacral motor.
Beautiful. Great. So, what are some ways to land in that sacral gut decision making when you find that you're an overthinker? Asking for a friend.
Yeah.
That's
And I've been there. So I'll say that,
yeah.
there's a lot. First of all, we're conditioned to use the head. We're rewarded with intellect and thought. And, even in school, we're really like told to like use our minds and get tested on that. But for this sacral authority, which generators innately have, the way I describe it is think of a little kid and when we were younger, and you would ask them a yes, no question. You would say, maybe, do you want ice cream? And the little kid might say, uh-huh. They don't think about it. They're just reacting from their innate gut and it's usually a yes for ice cream, I would say. And so it comes out, and if you ask them, well, how about some broccoli first? And they say, that's also the sacral. That sound is like coming from that gut motor response. And so when we're young and saying or we're usually told, use your words. And what happens is then we disconnect because we're going into the mind. We're learning to use our mind, our thinking mind, to explain, either explain a yes no, or we're talked out of that and so if you want to reconnect to it, start to use those grunting sounds or something similar, like you're just going to feel it coming up from the sacral. I think of it as a lighting up too. So when you're faced with a decision, is it lighting you up? Do you feel this like energy? You mentioned a few minutes ago goosebumps. That can be something also coming from the sacral. If you don't feel that 100% yes, then it's a no or a not now. It has to be strong. It has to really be there.
Mm, that's really helpful. Thank you. Because there are so many conceptual ways to feel into things or whatever, but the that really resonated when you said about the like that it comes from that it physically comes from your gut, like you can feel it versus saying, yes, I would like that. You know what I mean? And like articulating it from your mind, from a cerebral place versus like, yeah, you know what I mean? Like a more
Yeah.
guttural response. That's very interesting. And something that I often say with whether it's one-on-one clients or with groups is something I realized along my journey was that overthinking is under feeling.
Yeah. And one of the things I'll say too, you're right. The feeling part is what we want to connect to. We are, again, have many years of conditioning that put us back into the head, or the head also will try to take over to sometimes protect us, thinking, well, let me make sure I think this through and know, are there fears around it? Are there um, reasons we should say no? So the head will want to get involved. It's just naturally who we are. But another aspect of human design is that the head in human design is just meant to hold information and is not a good place to make decisions, partly because so many people have what we call undefined head center energy. And that means we often can change our mind. We often, we will think of different reasons to not do something. We'll overthink things. And part of it is the energy of the mind is like that. It's really meant just to be sort of a warehouse for ideas or information. It's not a decision making role. And we
Mm,
put it there, but it shouldn't be. And in your design, you have what's called a defined third eye or ajna. So there's a lot of activity also in your third eye, which is related to concepts and ideas and maybe even downloads that you get. And so it can be quite busy for you as well from that perspective.
Is that the reason why I scrunch between my eyes so much?
Well, I have that too.
Yeah.
But partly maybe, but I will just say too, it's interesting. Here you are as the host of a podcast. You have also definition in your throat. So there's a lot of ideas coming and it's connected to speaking those ideas out. So this is a great platform to do that.
Wow, thank you. Well, that's beautiful. That's a perfect example of something I've felt inclined to do for a while, but I was like, and kind of pulling back a little bit and this and that. And so that's a perfect example of I felt inclined towards something, but now knowing that it's part of who I am, like truly, which of course I was feeling, but then having this um not just confirmation, but it's like an affirmation. It's like keep going, go deeper. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's very helpful. Um, so there are these different aspects to the chart. You mentioned sacral authority, and then you were just mentioning these different bits like in the third eye and the throat. What else is in there? This is very interesting. Yeah, it's cool.
So, again, if you're starting early as a beginner, look at your energy type, look at that, the strategy of how that energy operates, as a generator type or a non-generator. And then look at your decision making, what we call authority. And then you can also look at, where the energy is consistent and what we call fixed in the chakra system in the centers. So I talked about the head center, the ajna center. There's 9 centers. So you would look at each of those. And also, when folks usually sign up for my email, I will also give a tip sheet. So this kind of is what we're going over right now. Another area you'd want to look at, I mentioned the incarnation cross. That's your life purpose, and also profile. So profile is sort of like the costume we wear in this life, like the what people see us as or what we want, how we want to present ourselves. It's really helpful in business to know your profile because I think this is how you can run your business, do marketing well. So I'll touch on that. You're what's called a 2-4 profile, and a 2 would represent the hermit, whereas the 4 line represents a connector, networker. So for this, and again, not everyone has this 2-4 combination, but for those who might, um, you need a little bit of downtime, alone time. We call it hermiting. But on the other hand, you also need time to connect to others because that networking and ability of connecting resources is really important for you. My husband has this profile, and what he's come to notice is he needs equal time alone as well as social time with others because that's how he becomes the connector to others and resourcing to help serve them. And then that downtime, that hermit time, is that time to also be able to just be alone and be more creative and have maybe more ideas and time to just settle from some of that other energy.
Very cool. Yeah, this is so interesting because there are different aspects. Something you mentioned before made me think of Ayurveda, like the different types in
Yeah.
Ayurveda. And then
Yeah.
this was making me, of course, think of introvert and extrovert and
Yeah.
how I forget what book. I read a book some years ago and it talked about how some people say I'm an introvert or I'm an extrovert, but it actually exists on a spectrum.
Yes.
And
Yes.
this is even more helpful. That book, whatever that book was very eye-opening that it exists on a spectrum. But so because I'm thinking specifically to when I was in my late 20s and there were 3 years in a row where I did Broadway plays. And so I was like really in the thick of a very busy time in the theater in New York and just having a lot of fun. And I was so lit up an extroversion of networking and connecting. And it's funny because some people don't like that word networking. They're like, oh, I don't like networking. And I'm like, oh, you mean hanging out with people who share your interests and getting really excited about ideas about the work that you do? You don't like that? Like, to me, networking is the best thing ever because, again, if you're pursuing your purpose, like, what is better than networking, like, around that? So, anyways, that's my perspective on that. So just to say, it's really interesting to hear the 2-4 that there's the hermit part and then the outgoing part because I would get so lit up on the outgoing part and then I would basically shut myself in my dressing room in the theater for like a couple hours at a time and just meditate or take a nap or whatever. So like I would go from one extreme
To
to
the
the
other.
other. And it
Hmm.
wasn't that I was like, oh, now I got to get out of here in either case. It was just like I realized I either want to be like at 100 or at 0 in that, like, you know what I mean? And I loved the balance of the two. Yeah, so it's so
Yeah.
fascinating.
Yeah, and sometimes they can feel not competitive, but like you just have to find that balance, I would say, with being in this profile. And you're right, like there is a spectrum of being introverted or extroverted. I mean, when you look at it through the lens of human design, is how I call it. Someone will say, "Oh, can you see if I'm introverted or extroverted?" And really, there's various places in your design that might show one side and might show another. Um, and it also, of course, we have all these other layers of us about how we've been brought up and what we believe, right? So again, these are just tools to help you to learn and to explore. Really, we call it an experiment. This is not a black and white tool where you have to be this way, but see how it resonates. And then experiment with using your human design. Like maybe start to see if you can make decisions using that sacral gut, making sure that I say in a business, if you have a business plan, making sure you put in time for downtime as well as time for networking, because especially like your chart, those are really important, I would say, in building business. So these are things to experiment with. And we have all the parts of the chart, even though there's 6 profile lines altogether, they show up in little ways in the chart. But yeah, your 2-4 is pretty strong, and um, you have that cross of service. So that's another incarnation cross is a great place to look. And then any place in your chart that has color or definition, we call it, that's shaded in the design. That's also important aspects to who you are.
Mm. This is so cool because to me, with mindfulness and everything, I mean, I've like in breathwork specifically, let me just say, I've studied from all kinds of teachers and read all kinds of books from anybody who's ever explored breathwork from any angle, everything from the most dense sciencey stuff to the more metaphysical stuff. And I personally love the practicality of mindfulness is ultimately what I'm getting at. I love the practicality of mindfulness. There are more like esoteric and kind of what some people would consider woo woo. You know, you hear that term
Yeah.
and it's just
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
okay, like I like to try to learn from everybody about everything, but just the way that my mind works, I love coming back to like, okay, how do I like I could look at everything and now how do I come back to the practical, actionable
Yeah.
elements? And what I'm loving and what I'm hearing from you about human design is it takes things again that resonate in other aspects, whether it's psychology or Ayurveda or these different things, and it's just giving it. It sounds like it's giving it a very pragmatic, actionable framework, right? Like where you may feel instincts or inclinations towards something, and then it gives you a sort of a pragmatic way of looking at it and implementing it to go even further, to take your authentic self even further into your own life on your journey.
Yes, yeah, and that's definitely what resonates for me is to look at it sort of a mechanical view of your energy, and that's how I used to see the chakra system. Um, we have the ability to be everything or anything. When you look at things at a more pragmatic or mechanical way, it's like taking out the operating manual of your computer or your car and saying, okay, let me read up about this and really see like what makes me tick or, how different energy kind of flows. So, yeah, it's really interesting when you look at it that way. And then you can also kind of go off into this more like holistic view of like so many different ways that your elements connect, and we call it going I call it going down the rabbit hole, where you could really start to like, well, investigate different things that have happened in your life and shown up in your design. It can get really out there as well, so you've got both ends
Mm.
of the spectrum.
Yeah, I love that because there's so much to draw just from intuition and curiosity. And I just say go for the ride. Like I've said this before in different contexts that like, even at Kripalu, for instance, when we go on meditative hikes and things, sometimes we do befriending a tree. And sometimes people come back from sitting with a tree quietly for like 10, 15 minutes, whatever. And they'll come back and they'll say, my tree said something to me, right? And they'll share. And the thing is, people hearing me say that even right now might think, that's okay. That's ridiculous. The tree talked to you. It's like, okay, whether the tree communicated or not, does it even matter if the message is good? Like
Okay.
whether it came from your
Yeah.
own
Yeah.
mind and unconscious or
Right.
whether it came from the tree. So it's like when
Right.
things are more metaphysical or are more like what some people might consider out there, it's like if the message is good, why does it matter? Like approach with curiosity, with exploration, like have fun doing it, and like all these things will come through. And anyways, that it's anchored in this pragmatism, I think also gives it a lot of room to then go explore even further and just see what
Exactly. Yeah.
happens. That's so cool.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And so just out of curiosity, like you said it came about in the 80s?
Yes.
Yeah, so how, because obviously like astrology is as old as time, right? So
Yeah.
how, or like what's the kind of the bullet points of how this came about or came to be human design?
Yeah. So the way I describe it is that there are some of these ancient philosophies, and it's like they were brought together in this mathematical formula. Um, what literally happened was there was a person who was on a sabbatical, really from his life, and in a vacation somewhere in Portugal, and he had this download. He had this visit with this voice, and kept him up for days. And he just, I'm not even sure if he wrote the notes or just was given the information and then, put it out there. And so it's not like somebody sat and figured this all out using a team of people. It really was like more of a divine download. But it's using these ancient systems. They've been around for thousands of years. So it's not like it's new. It's not just trendy. It's like we needed this new tool because, like I said earlier, we're in this evolutionary time where it's just another view of how to look at things and different perspective. And it was like this next level that we had to get to in order to help us learn more about ourselves.
That's beautiful. That's really cool. And again, however anybody interprets a download, right?
Yeah,
Someone sitting there gets a download. It's like, okay, but is what this person, this download that they received and now they shared, whether it's through a book or through speaking,
yeah,
is it helping people? Right? Like you could think whatever you want about the download or what that means or how you interpret that. And again, I'm just always leaning towards like what a skeptic might be thinking.
yeah,
Just because I used to be really skeptical of a lot of things, or I still I guess can be skeptical. But the point is, it's like no matter how you interpret a download, it's like, is there pragmatism to this approach? It very clearly there is, right? And is it helping people? Very clearly it does, So it's just it's so cool and it's so fascinating too, like
yeah,
how messages do come through for people and then how, certain messages come through for people on like different ends of the earth
yeah,
seemingly at the same time. There's evidence of that
yeah,
throughout history, like well before we even had, never mind the
yeah,
internet, before we even had telephones, people were like building similar things in different parts of the earth around similar times, or like
yeah,
certain scientific breakthroughs will come around the same time, like
yeah,
unrelated seemingly. So where's it, just
yeah.
dropping in
And
from the ether?
this could have happened too with this type of tool. By the way, the person who did channel that, he's passed. His name was Ra Uruhu. He went by. He did record a lot. So there's YouTube videos. He has a organization called the Jovian Archive. But he passed it on to other students who have gone on to do teachings. And it's kind of like yoga, where you have a lot of teachers teaching different styles, but the same core things. Um, and it started off with just maybe a few people, but now it's suddenly like more of a tipping point, which is why more and more people are hearing of human design. Why you heard about it a few years ago, and I did too.
Beautiful, beautiful. And are there any other aspects of the chart or of like an individual's journey with this that you'd like to touch on while we're here?
Well, something that I really have as part of my teachings and readings, if I do that one-on-one or in groups with people, is I really think the importance of self-care is tied to this, because even if you don't know a lot about your human design, we're energy beings. We need to take care of our energy and sustainable ways, manage it and thrive. And I see as self-care as one of the fastest ways to do that, because the right self-care for you is what lights you up, is what feels good. And when we're tuned into that, whether it's taking breath work as a class, or going outside, connecting to nature, or working on some trauma with a therapist, if you're doing something that helps you release that programming, that conditioning, the things that aren't serving you. And usually you can get that if, on a daily basis, if you're doing the right kind of self-care. that aligns your energy. That helps your energy express more of itself. And that's like living your true design. So self-care is a key piece that I'd like to talk about.
Beautiful. So when you're interpreting a chart, do you get clues into the types of self-care that might be the most supportive, or, ways that, yeah, like energy, maybe based on this person's energy, maybe they lean this way?
So yeah, so there's some general things like generator types, especially manifesting generators need some physical activity every day. If they're not sleeping well, it could be that they haven't used that sacral energy enough. Whereas the non-generator types, they might need some literal like laying down naps throughout the day, or at least 30 minutes before they go to bed. They need some downtime that will help them to sleep. But then there's other aspects that are really like, well, what do you find lights you up for self-care? And so it becomes much more unique too to each person. And usually we talk that through. And so yeah, there can be some general things that you can see in the design.
Beautiful. And two more things I was curious about here. One is you mentioned the chakra system, these energy centers, and is it the same chakra system, or are there like little different aspects? Because sometimes like
Yeah,
chakras,
yep.
are these energy centers,
Yeah,
but
good
yeah,
question.
yeah,
It's a good
okay.
question. So, the original chakra system shows 7 centers,
Hmm.
and in human design, we recognize 9. So, 2 of which mutated, meaning 2 split. Um, and so we look at 9 centers, and yeah, and there's still more evolution going. Like say in 2027, we're going to have a new energy type. I don't know how, because it's not like someone's maybe waving a magic wand or creating a new formula, but there will be, and we're starting to see more sensory beings, more children born on the spectrum, and that sort of pointing to their energy type is different and more important to tune into emotions and senses.
That's interesting. Yeah, I've been hearing about the telepathy tapes. I don't know if
Yeah,
you've heard.
I have
Yeah.
too. Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't listened yet. Have you listened yet, or?
I haven't. I haven't. It's
Yeah,
interesting. Yeah, we both have heard of it, and
yeah.
yeah, maybe it's our sign. We have to go listen in.
I will be getting around to it because it seems exactly in line with what you're talking
Yeah,
about, and
yeah,
that's very fascinating. And I had heard something about indigo children, this idea that somebody had this vision that there was going to be a generation of people who were like some sort of spiritually evolved, in
yeah.
that we're entering a phase,
I've
something.
I've heard about that years ago, actually.
Mm.
That it's already happened.
Mm.
Like some of the spiritual seekers right now might be in that category. But yeah, we're starting to become more aware. I think of different energetic sort of purposes beings and relating learning to relate maybe differently sometimes like you said telepathically too.
Yeah. Yeah, as much as there is to be, with news cycles and all the different stuff going on, does seem to be a lot of amazing things going on, but of course the news isn't isn't really going to highlight, spiritually evolved beings having
Exactly.
beautiful conversations and like indigo children and all the telepathy tapes. I doubt that the mainstream news is covering like good,
Yeah,
beautiful things that people are
yeah,
recognizing, but there seems to be an uptick of it. But also, I know that there's confirmation bias, if you would call it that. Like, of course, you and I are going to be looking or seeing those things in life more because based on what we do. But even this conversation that we're having, and conversations like this having platforms, there's just a more evolved consciousness in general, which does not is not to say that there isn't other things going on. Of course there are, but I
yeah,
think there's a lot to look forward to be excited about. I feel like there's a lot of good stuff in the air, and I know we're in a very big transition time between
yeah,
what you're mentioning here, astrology, the fourth turning. There's sociologists that wrote a book called The Fourth Turning, and we're in the phase of the fourth turning right now. There's a lot of different ways of seeing the world that all seem to
yeah,
support that we are in a massive transition period globally, you know?
yeah. And on that note, I think that it's important that you look at it through the lens of love and that we are here to survive and not fear-based. And that's something, again, and even in human design, when you hear certain aspects of your design, and again, look, you want to be aware of the shadow of the low expression, they call it, of certain characteristics. But then there's a higher expression, and that's that kind of higher vibration, that higher place to be more of service. So hopefully I think that's what you and I speak to, is sort of looking through that lens.
Mm, beautiful. I appreciate all of this. And I want to, just tie it all together here by asking about your book, which is Stop Overworking and Start Overflowing. Oh, there you
Yeah,
go. Beautiful.
right
25
here.
ways to
Yeah.
transform your life using human design. And so talk about pragmatic, practical, people who are have jobs, have lives, have families, right? Like this is beautiful what you're
Yeah.
doing.
And
And so, yeah.
like you, I have the 4 lines. So when I, back in 2020, thought about a book about human design, there's a lot out there that will go through a lot of what we just talked about, the mechanics of it. But I really wanted a sort of a story book. And so I was in a couple of collaborative books and thought, this is what I want to produce. So I pulled together 25 other human design practitioners. I didn't know who they were. I had to go actually search them out on social media, hashtag human design, because I didn't know a lot of people teaching it. And I have this book where each chapter is written by a different person and their story of how they discovered human design and what effect it had, so that people can relate to other generators in the book, or if they're a projector, and understanding, somebody's viewpoint. So it was something that came out a few years ago. A foreword by Karen Curry Parker, who's really well known in human design. So I was grateful for that. And I've spoken at the Human Design Conference in Colorado for a few years now. And I also teach a little bit at Kripalu. So the book was in the bookstore, a few copies of it a month or two ago. And yeah, I love helping people like dip their toes into human design and learn more.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much. I'm so glad that we've crossed paths many times at Kripalu, and I'm so grateful for that, and that you took the time to talk on here. So thank you so much for taking the time. It's really cool to share the work you're doing, because it's such fantastic work, and again, so pragmatic for so many people.
Thank you, thank you. And if you don't have time to read it, it's on Audible now too. So
That's awesome. I love that. Did you narrate it?
I didn't, but what
Uh,
happened is I picked a voice. I guess it sounds familiar because somebody said, I thought that was you. And I said, well, it
mm.
probably sounds like me. Yeah.
It's funny because I've narrated some audiobooks myself. I haven't written one. If I do, I'll probably narrate it. Or maybe I should say when I do, I'll narrate it. But
Yeah.
yeah, I've narrated some, and it's a marathon. That's the reason I was gonna ask if you did it, because it's like you're like, yeah, you're reading a book, but sitting in the booth there and stuff, it's a real, like, I have so much respect for
Yeah.
people who are narrators, and to bring a book to life and everything. So that's beautiful. That's on Audible. And so I'll say one more time, your website, HD with Christy, so KRISTI.com.
Yep. Great.
HD with Christy. Cool. And then that'll all be in the bio as well for the episode, the links and everything. So anything else while we're here?
I've got a Facebook community that I'd love for folks to also connect over there. Because again, a 4-line here. So you can find me mostly on Facebook. And yeah, thank you so much again.
Thank you.
Check out more at Mindfulness Unscripted on YouTube and Spotify, Instagram at Jon Orsini, jonorsini.com for in-person events, Zoom sessions, and more. I'll see you next time.